Ask anyone in Europe or the United States today, and you will hear the same concern. The middle class is disappearing. Money doesn't go as far as it used to. Everything is more expensive. I work more and I live worse. And this feeling is not imaginary. Between 1980 and 2020, the real purchasing power of Western middle classes flattened or even declined, while the prices of housing, energy, and education skyrocketed. The promise of shared prosperity that defined the 20th century seems to have broken. But it wasn't always like this. There was a moment, not in Silicon Valley, not in London, not in New York, but in old Prussia, when a backward country built in just 3 decades a strong, disciplined, upward moving, and proud industrial middle class. A country that went from being agriculture, fragmented, poor, and socially unequal, to becoming the second largest industrial power in the world, surpassed only by the United States. And the most incredible part, it did so with a system that was neither socialist or pure capitalism, but a unique combination of both. Strategic capitalism, intelligent state intervention, temporary protection for national industries, social reforms for the working class, and fiscal discipline and long-term vision. Economists today often call this a kind of mix, the Bismarck model or coordinated capitalism. And the truth is that it doesn't fit into the usual left-right political fight because it was based on a radically different idea. Markets cannot prosper without a strong nation, and a nation cannot prosper without a solid industrial middle class. To understand how miraculous this transformation was, you need to see where Prussia started. In 1860, Prussia was dominated by the aristocratic landowners called the Junkers, defined by massive rural inequality, weak in industry compared with the UK, dependent on primitive transport networks, with uneven literacy levels, with little financial capital, and growing social tension. It wasn't a country destined for automatic success. While the United Kingdom already had railways, cheap steel, major banks, and colonies feeding its economy, Prussia still depended on the countryside, on wheat, wood, and medieval guilds. There was almost no industrial middle class. Wealth was concentrated at the top, and at the bottom you had poor peasants, workers with no rights, isolated craftsmen, laborers earning extremely low wages, inequality was enormous, productivity was low, the country was too agricultural to compete, and that is where Otto von Bismarck enters the story. Not as an economist, not as a theorist, not as a liberal visionary, but as what he truly was, a strategist of power. His primary goal was not to create wealth, it was to create national strength. But he understood something fundamental that many countries still fail to understand today. National strength doesn't come from the army, it comes from industry. And industry does not exist without a strong, productive, loyal middle class. Between 1862 and 1890, he designed piece by piece an economic model that scholars now consider the foundation of what would later be called Rhenish capitalism, a blend of state, market, and social cooperation that still defines much of Germany today. This model combined, number one, selective tariffs to protect young industries, not to isolate the country, but to allow domestic industries to grow without being crushed by British giants. Number two, massive infrastructure building, railways, telegraphs, ports, roads, canals, the backbone of industrialization. Number three, promotion of strategic industries, steel, coal, machinery, chemicals, not whatever the market wants, but whatever the country needs. Number four, alliances between the state, banks, and industry. German banks financed long-term industrial projects. They invested in real factories, not speculation. Number five, pioneering social policies to prevent socialist uprisings, but also to improve workers' lives. Number six, large-scale technical education. Industrial schools, engineers, specialized technicians While the rest of Europe fought ideological battles between hard capitalism and utopian socialism, Bismarck quietly built a third path: disciplined, guided capitalism with a national purpose. Between 1871 and 1913, Germany quadrupled its coal production, multiplied its steel output by 7, surpassed the UK in chemistry and engineering, and created industrial giants like Siemens, BASF, Krupp, AEG, and also developed the largest railway network in Europe. It also built the most advanced technical education system in the world, tripled the size of its industrial middle class, reduced working hours earlier than many other countries, raised real wages faster than France or Italy, became a global leader in patents, and the most surprising part is that in just 30 years, it transformed from an agricultural economy into an industrial powerhouse. It was a miracle, but not a spontaneous one. It was engineered, it was intentional, it was strategic. And that is the central point. The German miracle was planned, not improvised. It wasn't laissez-faire, it wasn't socialism, it wasn't a revolution, it was just strategy. Imagine a backward country, not a colonial power, not a financial hub, not an industrial superforce, but a land of peasants, rural nobles, small workshops, and cities without chimneys. That country was Prussia around 1860, and in less than 30 years, it would become the largest steel producer in continental Europe, the world leader in chemicals and pharmaceuticals, the second largest industrial power on the planet, the nation with the best trained technical middle class in Europe, and one of the most innovative economies on earth. A miracle? No. Economic engineering, strategic plan inside a capitalist framework. A model that's rarely taught today, but that shaped Germany's future and changed world history. Here's how they really did it. While half of Europe argued about socialism versus capitalism, Bismarck was asking a very different question. What allows a nation to survive in a world where only the strong lead? For him, economics was in theory. It was power, and that power required heavy industry, advanced technology, efficient transport, stable capital, loyal workers, solid banks, national cohesion, a broad middle class, a modern army, competitive companies. So this could not emerge from letting the market do its thing, nor from rigid Soviet-style central planning. The market had to be guided, not replaced, not micromanaged, not set free completely, but disciplined. That was Bismarck's genius. In 1879, Bismarck introduced the famous iron and rye tariff. It protected steel and coal, wheat and rye. It protected also industrial workers and farmers alike. And this wasn't an ideological protectionism. It was a temporary strategic necessity. Why did tariffs work in Germany but fail in countries like Spain? Because Germany paired tariffs with massive infrastructure investment and advanced technical education, long-term industrial credit, innovation-driven companies, fiscal discipline, strict quality standards, clear industrial goals. In Spain, tariffs protected old and modernized industries. In Germany, tariffs protected new industries as they strengthened. The result? Between 1871 and 1813, German industrial output multiplied sixfold. Germany surpassed France and caught up with the UK in multiple sectors. No country can industrialize without efficient transport. Germany understood this earlier than almost anyone. Between 1850 and 1880, Prussia built 35,000 kilometers of railways connecting industrial hubs, mines, ports, and major cities. And unlike Spain, the German state supervised, standardized, and regulated track quality, gauge width, pricing, safety, and maintenance. In Spain, railways became speculative business, and in Germany, railways became state tool. What connects industry to the market is part of the nation. And with railways came the industrial explosion: Ruhr coal and steel, Silesia chemicals, Rhine region engineering and manufacturing, Hamburg and Bremen global ports, Berlin administrative and technological capital. Germany's economic map changed forever. This was one of the least known pillars of the German miracle. While British banks chased quick profits in trade colonies, German banks did the opposite. They made 20 to 30-year investments in factories, mines, steel, machinery, and chemistry. This gave birth to the universal banks: Deutsche Bank, Dresdner Bank, Commerzbank. They didn't just lend money, they took part in management, demanding planning, innovation, discipline, long-term strategy. And it was a symbiotic relationship: strong banks, strong economies, strong economy, strong companies, and strong middle class. This model still shapes Germany today. Prussia and later unified Germany created some of the most innovative companies in history. Many still dominate global markets. For example, BASF, more so-called or known for BASF, Siemens, Krupp, Bayern, AEG, Thyssen. These giants created massive employment, technical training, higher wages, scientific research, constant innovation. They were the engines of Europe's capitalism. Unlike many countries, in Germany, the army became an ally of the industry. It needed steel, weapons, machinery, uniforms, telephones, rail transport. This created a stable demand, allowing companies to reinvest and grow. The United States copied this model in the mid-20th century. China is replicating it today. Bismarck understood it in the 19th century. To build a strong nation, he had to prevent revolution. Socialism was spreading among workers. Urbanization was chaotic. Working conditions were harsh. So Bismarck created the world's first modern welfare system. Health insurance in 1883, accident insurance 1884, old age pensions 1889. No country in the world had anything similar. This produced three powerful results: worker loyalty, social stability, and growing urban middle class. While Britain debated reforms and the US struggled with labor conflict, Germany stabilized society. This was the true engine, the technical education. Bismarck built a system of technical schools, dual training, engineering institutes, scientific universities, industrial labs, chemistry schools, mechanical schools, industrial careers. Germany invented the idea of the high-skilled technical profession. This soared productivity, turned peasants into skilled workers, and created a proud, well-paid technical middle class. So the results came up. Germany versus UK, for example. In Germany, overtook Britain in chemistry, engineering, and technical education. Britain still dominated finance and maritime trade. Germany, though, produced cheaper, higher quality steel. The US became even larger industrially due to its vast resources, but the German model was more disciplined and scientific and stable long-term. Against France, well, let me tell you something. France excelled in traditional industries like textiles and luxury. Germany was more scientific, modern, and innovative. By 1913, German industrial output doubled France's. So between 1871 and 1913, real wages soared to 80%, faster than France and more steadily than the UK. The working hours fell sharply, from 70 to 72 hours a week to 15,760 by 1913. Of course, better working conditions, inspections, accident compensation, industrial standards, and others. Social Security protected families, widows, elderly, and the injured. Accessible technical education was the real social mobility. And the state and union cooperation, conflicts existed, but far milder than in France or Italy. Germany created the strongest industrial middle class in Europe with concrete policies, not speeches. So the German miracle can be summed up in 10 points. Smart temporary tariffs, massive and efficient infrastructure, stable industry-oriented banking, cutting-edge tech companies, elite technical education, social policies to stabilize society, fiscal discipline and long-term vision, alliances between state banks and business, continuous investment in science and innovation, building a strong technical middle class as a national pillar. That was the real goal, turning poor peasants into skilled, proud workers. Throughout this entire video, we've talked about numbers, policies, strategies, companies, railways, chemistry, banking, wages. But behind all of that, there was something way more powerful. Something you'll never see on a chart. Something you cannot measure in tons of steel or kilometers of railroad track. The Prussian pride. And this is the most important point of this final block. The German economic miracle wasn't only the result of economics decisions, it was the result of a mentality, a way of seeing the world, a deep conviction that a country must be built with discipline, sacrifice, vision, and a shared sense of purpose. Today, when you look at the West, Europe, the United States, you see the exact opposite. Fatigue, pessimism, fragmentation, internal battles, short-term politics, disoriented societies, and elites who no longer believe in 30-year products, but only in a 30-day headlines. And that is the great difference. The Prussians of the late 19th century did not have more resources than the Spanish, Italians, French, or Russians. They didn't have more capital, didn't have great colonies, didn't have oil, didn't have a massive navy. They had something more valuable: collective discipline, national pride, a sense of duty, long-term thinking, respect for technique and knowledge, a rigorous work ethic, and a clear vision for the future. For them, industrialization wasn't a luxury, it was a national mission. Peasants became skilled workers, children learned technical trades, young people trained in engineering, families saw industry as a pathway to prosperity. There was a sense that the country was moving together, pushing in the same direction. Today, sadly, in the West, that spirit is hard to find. While Bismarck thought in decades, while he planned railways that took 20 years to complete, while he designed an education system that would take a generation to bear fruit, today we live in an age dominated by 4-year election cycles, policies designed for likes and clicks, shallow debates, permanent polarization, improvisation, empty promises, technocrats without vision, elites without historical responsibility. The West is not poor. The West has not lost talent. The West has not run out of resources. What it has lost is direction and also faith in the future. Politics no longer organizes collective effort. It now manages collective emotions. When Prussia began its industrialization, it was surrounded by richer empires, larger populations, and countries with greater historical prestige. It was the new power, provincial, rural, without glamour, without major colonies. And what did they do? Work, plan, save, educate themselves, build factories, banks, infrastructure, laboratories, railways, social insurances, systems. They built what did not exist. Today, however, part of the West collapses into defeatist narratives. We can't compete with China. We can't manufacture anything. Reindustrialization is impossible. The past was better. The middle class is doomed. Europe is a museum. The West is finished. This mindset is anti-Prussian. It is the exact opposite of what allowed Germany to rise from nothing. Prussian industrialization wasn't just technology. It was a moral project, an unwritten pact. The state invests, industry innovates, banks finance, workers train, companies pay well, universities generate science, and everyone moves forward together. It was disciplined capitalism, strategic capitalism, capitalism moralized by national duty. Today, the West lives with a capitalism without direction, excessively financial, very speculative, short-termist, focused on immediate dividends, disconnected from real industry. Meanwhile, China, with its own authoritarian version, applies many Prussian lessons: massive infrastructure, technical education, advanced manufacturing, state strategic banking, long-term investment. Europe, however, is trapped in internal debates, identity conflicts, giant bureaucracies, contradictory regulations, and fear of risk. There is a deep truth behind the German miracle. Prosperity does not appear on its own. It's built with effort, discipline, and vision. A middle class does not appear by decree. It does not appear through subsidies nor motivational rhetoric. It emerges from strong industries, skilled jobs, constant innovation, real production, wages tied to productivity, technical education, institutional stability, capital investment in the nation, long-term planning. This is exactly what Prussia understood. This is exactly what the West has forgotten. The Prussian spirit is not militarism. It is not authoritarianism. It is not nostalgia for a rigid past. The Prussian spirit is collective responsibility, future vision, pride in work, respect for technique, intelligent planning, stable institutions, investment in people, moral and economic discipline, strategic clarity, and it is a spirit the West desperately needs. Because while we argue in circles, while our politicians obsess over cultural wars, while our societies freeze in pessimism, while the middle class shrinks, other countries are doing what Bismarck did 150 years ago. Planning, investing, training, building, innovating, advancing. That is the final message. We can recover prosperity. We can rebuild the middle class. We can learn to believe in ourselves again. But we must recover the philosophy that turned Prussia into a powerhouse. Vision, discipline, industry, technique, work, and future. That is the real Germany miracle. That is the legacy the West has forgotten. And that is the path it must remember if it wants to survive.